Good morning. Glad you are watching this, listening to this. Just a couple of things to say about it before we start here. This is Holy Week. It is the week that leads up to Easter, and just want to provide some reflections each day, or a reflection each day on the something to think about, to keep our hearts and minds focused on Jesus and what he did 2,000 years ago for us as we lead up to Easter and celebrate Easter this coming Sunday. So basically I'm just going to read a passage of scripture from Easter week and give something to reflect on it about. So this morning I'm going to kick off with Mark chapter 11. I'm going to read verse 12 through 19. And it says, on the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a den of robbers. And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, they went out of the city. Have you ever gone to a place and found it not to be what you thought it was going to be? It maybe you just found it wasn't going to do for you what you thought it was going to do for you. Yeah, I don't know, a few weeks ago I went to a trailhead, went to go for a run, and I hadn't been to this trailhead for a while, and this trailhead is fairly small, it's not well marked, it's just a rough old trail to get down to it, and a limited parking area. Got there, and to my surprise I discovered that it had been developed, and now there was a tarmac road down to it, and it was an official large car park at this trailhead, and lots of parking spaces, although that didn't do me much good because they were all full. Eventually I did find a parking space and parked and got out on the trail for my run, and I discovered that it had become a very popular dog walking spot. Now, don't get me wrong, and don't email me, don't text me. I love dogs, I like dogs, but I don't like dogs when I'm running, and I don't like dogs jumping up at me when I'm running particularly, and I don't like dogs that are out of control. And basically it's just kind of ruined the experience the dogs got between me and my experience, my pleasure that I usually get from running down that trail. And I don't suppose I'll go back there again. And I can imagine that was Jesus's annoyance, really, when he got to the temple. Not that he found a load of dogs in the temple running around off their leads, but he found what was going on in the temple was inhibiting people from doing what was the purpose of the temple. Now, it might be argued, right, by the authorities, and no doubt it was argued by the authorities, that what they were doing, setting up this commerce in the temple, was necessary, and they were just being pragmatic because they were having visitors from, miles and miles away, and it was impractical for these visitors to bring their sacrifices with them, and and so they were just providing a necessary service for these visitors, so that when they got to Jerusalem and they wanted to go to the temple to make their sacrifice, they could buy a nice sacrifice and take it into the temple before God. And more than that, they could also exchange their money, because at the temple you could only use one currency, and these people were coming from all over the place and they had different currencies. And so again, they had this service. They were thinking of the visitors, right? I mean, because they were offering these services where you could buy a sacrifice and you could exchange your money, and it was all good. And if merchants made a bit of a profit, and the temple authorities made a cut off it all, then so much the better. It was a win-win situation. Except it wasn't a win-win situation as far as Jesus was concerned, because the way that Jesus saw it, first of all, he was not happy that people were profiting off God. That was not what God had designed the temple to be. It was not a means for people to make money out of it. And secondly, they were taking up room. They were taking up room in the temple because they were in the court of the Gentiles. Now, some of the Jews might have argued, well, the court of the Gentiles, that's the most important place, right? Except for Jesus, what was Jesus' mission about? It was to bring Gentiles in to God's kingdom. It was an important place for Jesus' ministry. And as such, he wanted the room to bring the Gentiles into his kingdom. And it was unacceptable for Jesus that all these tables and all these people were cluttering up the space. And so he took matters into his own hands, didn't we? As we read, he turned over the tables and he drove out the money changers and the merchants. And he said, "Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers." You think about prayer, and prayer is pretty simple. Sometimes we make it complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's just communication. It is talking one person to another person, us talking to God and God talking back to us. One person speaking and the other person listening, and then vice versa, the other person speaking and the first person listening. It's a simple and easy concept to grasp, and we know how to do that. And we don't have to go to Jerusalem to talk to God, because Jesus Christ was the perfect sacrifice offered up once and for all. And through Jesus Christ, we have access to God. We have access to the temple of God, if you like, and we can come and talk to God, and we can hear from God any time we want. And Jesus paid the price for us to be able to do that. But sometimes we just clutter it all up, don't we? At least I do. I clutter up the precinct of God's temple with, I don't know, all kinds of stuff that really shouldn't be there. Sometimes we do it in our churches too. Sometimes we get caught up in the whole consumerism in church, just like there is consumerism outside the church, and we're too focused on the things that kind of make money, right? Like music and books and this and that. And in our hearts and our minds, we get cluttered up with various things, and it just gets in the way of us having a conversation with God. And so maybe today we could just reflect on that. We could reflect on what is in the precincts of our hearts. What is cluttering up our hearts? What gets in the way of our hearts of having a good conversation with God? Because that's why Jesus came and died on the cross, so that we can have that communion with God. So let's not clutter it up again after Jesus has made the way open. Just reflect on that today. All right, that's it for today, and I'll have another one for you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful, blessed day, and be safe, and stay well. Right, bye-bye.